Joining me now once again is Kyle Hightower, who covers everything Boston for the AP, focuses a lot on the Patriots, and man, you have been busy. Welcome into the show. Thanks for being with me again.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Listen, let's start with Brian Flores. I mean, this is shameful that we're still talking about this. Obviously not shameful enough for the NFL to do something substantive about it. This is just the most recent example of them shying away from making any kind of meaningful change as it relates to race or issues involving women or truly anything else. But, you know, a lot of people have thrown the word brave around for what Brian Flores is doing, which I think implies that the notion that his career was over when he made this decision. Do you think that that's true, or can he survive this and continue to coach in this league?
Well, you never want to completely rule it out, but I think the track record, as you mentioned, with the NFL has kind of stepped on some landmines in the past. And the biggest comparison you can really draw is what happened to Colin Kaepernick, a guy who stepped out on principle, from his point of view, and he obviously sued the NFL as well with his own class action suit. That was settled. The NFL settled that lawsuit. Roger Goodell made obviously the big public, apology to how the NFL treated Kaepernick, and yet he still didn't have a job in the NFL. So I think just that track record of what happened in that Colin Kaepernick situation is kind of prologue probably to what Brian Flores is going to face, by taking this step and this measure against NFL, regardless of the outcome, because that's just the track record where it's been, and the machine is the NFL is going to keep churning, it seems, no matter what, and we're going to see what happens in this case. But that seems to me to be kind of the prologue what we're looking at.
Is there anything from looking at the case, and you have the text messages with Bill Belichick that indicate that the Giants had already made their decision before he was even interviewed, and some of the other things that he mentioned? Flores has detailed the relationship in the league as, aligning that with that of a plantation. I mean, he's making some really big claims. Is there anything that leads you to believe that he has enough to take down this behemoth that generates billions of dollars that, as you mentioned, has seemingly been able to sidestep every other major crisis that they have faced to date?
Well, just in a cursory look, on its face, the text message exchange between his former boss and Bill Belichick and himself, and with that Brian Dable situation, with New York Giants is very damning. I mean, it's just anybody from a cursory look at it, even from an outsider, nobody who's involved in football or in sports can see like what's going on there. And whether, obviously Bill Belichick was not involved, it would seem from what we've seen so far in the decision making or in making those wheels kind of churn. But obviously everybody by the end of that text message exchange is aware of what's happened in that situation, that one guy has gotten a job, the other guy hasn't even interviewed yet for that job, and it's already gone. So, I mean, that's very clear. But as far as, what happens from here, it's tough. It's a tough situation because, he's obviously burning a bridge there, with his former employee, somebody who has a lot of power in Bill Belichick, who's obviously reconnecting the league, and it's just a tough situation all the way around. And it's kind of hard to see where the NFL goes from here, just as far as, not only clean up its image, clean up that perception of what's going on, but also just rectifying the situation for it to get better. Because I think that's what everybody wants here, is for this to improve. And what's the way forward, which we're trying to figure out now.
Everybody talks about how calculating Bill Belichick is, and I know that maybe partly in jest, the notion has been raised that he would have somehow been in cahoots in this process to stick it to the league for all the times that they've come for him. But from everything that you can gather, do you get the sense that this truly was an honest mistake from Belichick, thinking that Flores did in fact have the position secured and then realizing he had made such a critical mistake?
I mean, I think he did. I mean, it's a tough situation for him because he has connections, obviously, to Flores, who was, a guy who he brought up through his own system, and got him to the point where he's able to get a head coaching job in Miami. He also has connections to Brian Dable, a guy who's, worked for, is one of his closest friends in the business and personally, and Nick Saban. And obviously Dable had, obviously started his career there, in New England, and had some roots there and connections to Belichick as well. So he's dealing with two people who he knows very well. He wants to see them both succeed. I have no doubt that in my mind that he was probably proud to see, Brian Flores get the job in Miami, to still be in the mix for jobs, as well as he was proud to see Brian Dable. So I think in Bill Belichick's defense, I think he's a guy who's probably, for what we've seen so far, we'll see what happens going forward. But this guy is caught in the middle. It's kind of he's kind of serving two different sides here. I think it was an honest mistake, but, it obviously drops the curtain back on what's going on behind the scenes, which everybody can see now. And I mean, it's just business in the NFL, and how, not just the NFL, I would say, but probably, how things go on in other facets, other professions as well. Just kind of how, it's tough threading, and, but we're going to see more as it develops, and the story's not going away.
Not to mention the claims that are made about Miami potentially throwing their season away, and just all kinds of dirty laundry being aired by Flores with the league. And honestly, I think everybody believes it. And unfortunately, I think it's going to take a very special kind of NFL owner to give Flores a chance down the line, especially watching them sidestep everything that happened with Dan Snyder around those allegations of sexual misconduct at the NFL owners meetings. I mean, they have the protection of Roger Goodell and the Shield, it seems like, on every major issue. And I just don't know what it's going to take. I mean, you're talking about a league that generates billions and billions and billions of dollars in revenue. And these fan bases, from what I can gather, especially with legalizing gambling, are not going to stop watching. So, is there anything that anybody can do to stop the NFL from basically doing whatever it wants?
Well, there are a couple of things. I mean, I think that, as you mentioned, the revelation of what was going on in Miami with, allegedly with Flores and asking him to throw games, threatening the integrity of the game, and you mentioned gambling, that's something that the NFL really can't afford to, if true, again, if proven true, if that stands, they can't allow that to stand if that's true, because they're in bed with gambling now, for better or for worse. People aren't going to bet on games they think are fixed. So that's one threat there. And, as far as the other, I think one thing that could shift the tide is that players have been proven to have a lot of power. They're starting to, across sports, starting to learn the level of their power. And if players, revolt or stand behind Flores and say, hey, we want to see, more minority coaches in the game, and, we're not going to play. We're going to use our own power and step away and not play games because of that. That would definitely, you have no workforce, you have no product, you have nothing to present to the fan base. Outside of that, short of that, it's going to be tough to see where we go forward. But I think that's one thing, if players did decide to do that, that would disrupt the system, because the NFL obviously needs players and needs the product put on the field to present to fans, to present to the consumers.
But, it is kind of like a nightmarish reminder of how woefully short they fell on issues of social justice, where you see these slogans on fields and on hats and on the back of jerseys, but you say to yourself, like, yeah, okay, all right, where do I sign up? And there's seemingly no place to sign up. And I remember, over the summer, over the last year and a half, between the pandemic and issues of social justice really peaking, that's something that we discuss. Like, players have the power. This is an era of player empowerment. And yet I still feel that the league has fallen woefully short in addressing those issues in a meaningful way. Is it up to the NFL Players Association for players to get together on their own, to strike, to sit? I mean, what is the manifestation of that desire to call for more diversity from the top down actually look like, if the players are the only ones that have the power to change it?
It's a great point, Carolyn. I mean, and it's the one voice we haven't heard in the discussion yet, really. It's from that Players Association side of it. They've been, for the most part, players are speaking out slowly. You see some communication on social media and stuff like that. But as a whole, that voice hasn't spoken as a group yet. And you're waiting to see what they're going to say, what they're going to do, because, again, they're in a tough spot, because they're beholding, these are their bosses too. These are people who will ultimately hold their professional fate in their hands, who is going to bring in their own paychecks. But we've seen a willingness, for players to make that ultimate sacrifice, and to risk their own careers. Kaepernick obviously is the greatest example. Others who are still in the league, others some of them who aren't any longer, have shown that that risk shown that willingness to take that risk. And I think that's the one domino we haven't seen yet is how the players react in mass as a whole. And the Player Association still hasn't made their statement or hasn't made their, hasn't shown what they're going to do just yet. So that's one thing that we should also be watching. And one thing I'm definitely watching to see what happens next.
Yeah, me too. I think you bring up a great point. I really feel for Brian Flores. I've watched him kind of go through all the media interviews that he's done the last couple of days with his lawyers, and I hope that he can stay in front of the news cycle for a long time. That is notoriously fickle, especially these days, and just continue to hammer home some of the things that he's been thinking and feeling, and I wish the best for him. That, and you've also been busy with Tom Brady's retirement, and I think in New England, maybe the thing that spiked everybody's hair right away, if they have hair, no offense, is just the failure to mention the Patriots initially when he did finally decide that it was going to come from the horse's mouth. I mean, did that surprise you? Do you think that was calculating? What was behind that, do you think?
It definitely rang, it was the first thing that stuck out. Everybody read the statement. You read it. I read it. And the one thing you mentioned, like immediately you get through it and you're like, did he mention the Patriots? And, and of course he didn't. And, it's, in Tom Brady's defense, not that he needs us to defend him, but in his defense, back in March, of 2020, when he initially left the Patriots, he had the long flowing, statement about the Patriots, thanking them. He's had the big powwow with Belichick and stuff, when they played the Patriots last year when he returned. He's been effusive about his praise and about how much New England's meant to him. But at that moment, at that time you retire, you do expect the guy to, to at least say, hey, acknowledge the 2 decades he spent, building six championships, the icon he became. He will forever be New England's favorite son. Win, lose, or draw, he will always be New England's favorite son. But it did tweak, a lot of nerves, here in the area, because they have a connection. They believe they have an ownership or a piece of Tom Brady. I mean, that's their guy. Now, if he came back, next week and was, holding, just a barbecue with the local whatever, they'd all show up. They make no mistake about that too. But it definitely tweaks some nerves. But was it calculating? I think Brady doesn't do anything that's just not have some kind of agenda behind it, some kind of thought behind it. So maybe there's still some bad blood there between Belichick and I don't know. That's still to be reported on, still to be parsed out. But gives us another thing to this mega Boston sports mix. Another thing for us to discuss, and believe you me, they're discussing it up here.
I was just laughing from afar, not living in the area anymore, but watching the headline on the Boston Globe while he mulled retirement on Saturday before it was even official, taking the front page from this nor'easter bomb cyclone that was slamming the majority of the area. I mean, he still carries so much weight, and he's so polarizing. And what's interesting, well, first, before we move on, did you bite on the rumor at all, even for a second, that he somehow left them out of the goodbye because he was going to come to New England the next day and retire as a Patriot and sign a one-day contract? Or when you heard that, did you think like, absolutely not?
I didn't go for it. I mean, I think that, he's a guy who's earned his icon status for sure. I mean, and I think he revels in it. I think he revels in, the idea that, that he still has the pull in New England. I think he revels in the idea that, that he was able to go leave New England, win a championship the next year. And just how the statement was set up, just completely, methodically thanking the Bucs people, Bucs after Bucs after Bucs after Bucs.
You thank the janitors there, man.
Right. I mean, it's everybody, within the organization from top to bottom. That's calculated.
Yeah.
And so I think that, he knows the status he has in this area. He knows he's always going to have it. But in that moment, he wanted to take that moment to kind of rib, for whatever reason, people in New England. That unlike other icons like Michael Jordan, he took the time during his own Hall of Fame enshrinement to rib the coach who didn't select him back in high school. So these guys who achieve this status, they pick their moments, and when they want to pounce, they pounce.
It's interesting you bring up Jordan, because I think he is maybe the only other athlete in history that has had the level of exposure that a guy like Tom Brady has had heading into this next chapter of his life now, where one of the tweets I love, one of the data points that was my personal favorite was from Mike Mulvihill over at Fox Sports, and said that Americans have consumed more than 22 billion hours of Tom Brady playing football, or it was more than 18 billion hours of Tom Brady playing football over his 22 NFL seasons, like a trillion minutes or something crazy like that. And to me, that just speaks to not only the longevity, but the success. Because, I mean, to think about the fact that he's been featured in 3 out of the 5 most watched TV programs in American history, which are all Super Bowls, I mean, just speaks to how aware Americans are. 8, 9 out of 10 Americans in the country know exactly who he is. It's rare that an athlete kind of has that sort of global celebrity and awareness heading into this next chapter of their life. I just wonder, watching him post on Instagram now, kind of reposting all the love and adoration that he's getting from all of his celebrity friends and stuff around the world. Even if you talk to a journeyman offensive lineman, a guy like Ross Tucker comes to mind. I remember talking to him after he retired and he said, like, it's really, really tough to not have the structure, to not wake up and know what you're doing every day. And even though he's Tom Brady and he's got crypto and fashion and TB12 and health and wellness, I still think spending more than half of your life in the National Football League with such a regimented schedule that could also be a place of refuge probably for a global celebrity that has a desire to feel normal is going to be like a seismic shift in his life. And I think it's going to be difficult. I mean, how difficult do you think it's going to be?
I think you're spot on. I think it's going to be very difficult. I mean, it's dropping off of a cliff. I mean, one day, you go from, as you said, the regimented lifestyle of, when March hits, I have to do this. When April hits, okay, I'm getting ready for minicamp. When May hits, okay, let me get ready for training camp. Let me have my passing workouts with my receivers. Let me get my diet in order. Let me get back to the avocado ice cream, and things like that. I mean, it's what he's done, and he's done it longer. He's done it so much longer than anybody else has done it in NFL history and football history, that it's going to be a big cliff for him to step off of. And is he a guy like a Peyton Manning who's got that, going to be on SNL and doing that? No, I don't think he's that guy. Is he a guy who's going to be coaching? I never think that was Tom Brady's bag. The analysts are coming after him. Every network wants to get a piece of him, maybe get him on the air. Maybe he dips his toe in it, but I don't think that's it for him. I think he's a guy, we don't really know what his next step is. We know he has options, but it's going to be interesting to see what, as you say, the Tom Brady life after football, life after just sport in general. This is a drop off that I don't think any athlete you can really compare to has had to make. I mentioned Jordan before. He tried to come back. Is Tom going to try to come back at 50? Of course not. Not in football. But it's going to be a big adjustment. And one out that I think we all wonder, is he prepared for? Because we know we have this resume of what he's done and what he's lived, but to have it all taken away in a second, obviously it's by retirement, it's by his own volition, but it's going to be a big drop off I think we've never seen before. And whatever that next chapter is, I think we're all eager to see just how he eases into it.
I think you're spot on about all that. And even an analyst role, I almost feel is like a little bit below him. I wonder if we see NFL ownership in his future. Honest to God, I did an interview about this a couple days ago, and somebody asked me if he was going to be the next president of the United States. I mean, I didn't even know how to answer that, Kyle, to be honest. I'm like, every door is going to be open to him. He could maybe do whatever he wants to do. But it just speaks to just all the options that he's going to have. And it'll be fascinating to see how he handles it all. Thank you so much for being with me. I've kept you way too long already. I appreciate it. And before we go, if you could just tell people where to find you on Twitter, AP, everything, just a quick shout out there.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me as always. Check me out at Kyle Hightower on Twitter, and check me out at apnews.com for everything I write.
All right. Thanks, Kyle. We'll check in with you again soon.
Thanks, Carolyn.